Hello, my name is Jose Hernandez. I'm the president of the New York City chapter of United Spinal Association, and we're here with three wonderful guys that are in the hospitality business. First, I'm going to go over with some of the housekeeping rules. We're in attendee mode or webinar mode. We're not going to be able to see you, but if you have a question, please submit it through the Q&A or to the chat feature, and I'm going to be monitoring it. Um, for those who need closed captioning, we have closed captioning available at the closed captioning button below. So, guys, I'm gonna allow you guys to just quickly introduce yourselves, and we'll go right into the program. So, starting with Bruno, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Bruno. I run a hospitality group called Elemental Hospitality, and one of the restaurants that we have created is called Rosatoro, that is welcoming to folks in wheelchairs and everybody.
Eli,
Hey guys, I'm Eli Culp. I am a chef and restaurant owner. I started. Well, I didn't really start in New York, but I originally from the West Coast. Came out to New York City in 2005 and worked there until 2017 until we moved down to Philadelphia. So now we're in Philadelphia. Still run restaurants, still involved. So it's in a different capacity now.
and now my good friend and fellow board member Yannick Benjamin.
Hello, everybody. Same kind of story as Eli. I worked in the front of the house all my life, families in the business, really worked in some really great restaurants. And I also have the nonprofit Wine on Wheels, which is wine centric and food centric to raise money for people with disabilities. And currently work as the head sommelier at a private club in Midtown Manhattan called the University Club, and soon to be restaurant operator during these crazy times. A restaurant called Contento, located on 88 East 111th Street, right in the heart of East Harlem.
Cool. So we're gonna start off, with Eli. Um, what was life before becoming disabled in the hospitality industry, and life after your disability working in hospitality? And then I know your story is unique to the other guys because you started off in the back of the house, no?
Right. So I've been in the kitchen my whole life. At 14 years old, my dad pushed me into a restaurant and said, "See if you can find a dishwashing job for the summer." It's a story that you often hear in the industry is with chefs. And from there, I just sort of found my passion early on. I went from the small kitchen in a small town where I grew up in Washington State, and then I went down to Portland, Oregon, worked down there, went to school down there for food, and then Seattle, and made my way out east. So I really wanted to come to New York City. I had this dream of coming to New York City because I knew that's where the best chefs and the best restaurants existed. It's definitely one of the few cities in the country, especially in the early 2000s, that you could find this amazing cooking going on no matter where you looked. And for me, coming out to the East Coast was really fulfilling a lifelong dream. And in 2015, I um, I started cooking. I took a job in Philadelphia as a chef partner, and we maintained residence in New York City as well. And I was, my days were busy, as a chef in general. But by that time, we had four restaurants, and we were opening one in New York City. The plan was to sort of grow in Philadelphia, then open in New York City, and we had just signed the lease in March of 2015 for our space on Hudson Street. It's called High Street on Hudson, and I was injured only about 2.5 months later, um, after we signed the lease. And I was commuting between New York City and Philadelphia. Just a busy schedule, going back and forth. Trying to run different restaurants, hiring, menu development, everything a chef does, mentorship, coaching, you're just trying to keep your team together, and all three different restaurants or four restaurants at that time, trying to keep them together, keep them motivated, keeping the menus up to season, making sure that you're doing, the you're pushing your teams to always work harder and faster and better. I really believed in that team atmosphere. And as a chef, and any manager, I think are really key to success is creating that atmosphere. People feel that sense of belonging. I was really I was really sort of finding my rhythm and just entering the prime of my career. So without a doubt, you know, being in the Amtrak crash and sort of how my life changed, for
Can
the
you, I'm sorry, can you elaborate a little bit on the crash and how it changed everything in the restaurant industry
yeah,
for
no
you?
doubt. So the for the first couple of years after my injury, well, for the first year it was more about recovery. As we were opening the restaurant in New York City, I slowly got back into the restaurants more and more. I'm a pretty high level quadriplegic, so I lost the use of my hands for grabbing things, and so I really lost my sense of identity, and I really was struggling with that. you know, my chef life, outside of being a father and a husband, was the most important thing in the world to me. It was the number one. It was what I identified through and through. Food still is a big part of my life, but at that point, going through that recovery phase, I really turned my back on food. I blamed it a little bit for my ambition and being on that train going between two cities, and it was really hard for me to kind of come to grips with the fact that this just happened to me. It wasn't anybody's fault. It wasn't something that I was the wrong. It was just more wrong place, wrong time, and all that.
Exactly.
So after I got through some of that depression and worked on it, and I was part of the Mount Sinai um, crew that you're working with, Bruno, with Angela Riccobono, and she was so instrumental in sort of my recovery, mentally and emotionally. Um, and but now my career now is different. I mean, 100. I can't say it's very similar to what it was then. I'm
We'll
not.
get, I'm gonna cut you off. We'll get back to the career and stuff like that. I want to give, Bruno and Yannick a chance to, tell their stories and, how has life become, what is life? What was life before becoming disabled in the hospitality industry, Bruno, and how has that changed?
So my story is a little bit different, where my family's been in the hospitality industry for many years back in Peru. I'm originally from Peru, and I was been helping around. I was like more helping, more like taking space rather than actually helping clean up the tables and everything like that. When we moved to this country, they started a business, and I wasn't that involved in it. I got injured in Costa Rica 10 years ago in 2010, and after that, I was doing my career or something else, and my mentality changed. So a year and a half ago, and so I got involved in the hospitality industry, where I wanted to come in and do something a little bit different. My family has a community type restaurant. I wanted to do a bit something more inclusive with my brothers, and I wanted to choose a spot that would be a lot more welcoming for folks in wheelchairs. And as you guys, I don't know if you guys can see in the picture, but all the walls around the restaurant roll up to give access to folks to come in from the outside. And the reason my life changed after being injured is because I used to go out a lot, and you go to a bar and then you go to a place and realize that, oh, actually I need to use the restroom. Let me go to completely the other side of the place to use the restroom. Say excuse me 1,000 times, pull somebody's coat to say hello. Can I move so I can get over there? And I realized that it wasn't as accessible to other people, and I want to create a concept that was a bit more accessible than that. And we were able to come in, and the area for you to be will be right next to the bathroom. So things like that folks don't really pay attention to, that folks in wheelchairs like us do appreciate. And the second part of it, after being in a wheelchair, my girlfriend and I were in Puerto Rico one day, and a group of folks that were deaf and mute came into the bar that we were in, and nobody could realize, nobody could communicate with them. And that made me realize that on top of being making this accessible, I wanted to make it accessible for everybody a bit more. So I had a plan of coaching the staff to speak sign language minimum, to be able to say welcome and let other people come and enjoy the experience, enjoy the Peruvian culture. Obviously, with COVID, things got into a halt, but that was the plan. I think I was contacting a lot of folks in the city to be able to see who I can get to be able to help me with this project.
I
But
remember
yes, you remember that? Yeah.
you greeting some people in sign language, and you had wheelchair day last March.
Right, we have an International Wheelchair Day here, and that was more to, and there's several philosophies around whether it was good or bad, but the intention was that we wanted to allow folks to experience what it is to be in a wheelchair and roam around the restaurant. We people discounts. We had a huge support by New York City Spinal. We had a CI, and we had Mount Sinai. They provided temporary wheelchairs for folks to use so they can dine in a wheelchair. So
So
my
if you
Go
just
ahead.
if you look over his shoulder, Bruno's shoulder, you have a person sitting in a wheelchair, and that person is actually an able body, um, eating at a restaurant, in a wheelchair, so that they can experience, somewhat, the get the idea of dining in a wheelchair.
That's right. That's right. So I would say that after the injury, my perspective changed so much that sort of triggered something in me to come into the hospitality industry to do something a little bit different. And throughout it, I met people that are as passionate to help others as others who are part of my team now. So
Cool. So Yannick, I know you've been around a while, and you
Yeah.
have same question. What was
Mhm.
life before being disabled, becoming disabled in the hospitality industry, and how has it changed for you?
Sure. I was very lucky. Kind of again, very similar story to Eli. I was pretty much groomed to work in this industry. My first job was just around 15 years old. I did the opening of a restaurant that's still there behind the New York Public Library on in Bryant Park. Name of the restaurant is called Bryant Park. So I love everything about hospitality, the food, the wine, the people, and it was just a natural fit. Interestingly enough, I guess I have two cousins that are blind. And at the age of 20, being this, 6'2", I was pretty relatively big guy and took really good care of himself, very athletic. And I never forgot the day that my mom came into my bedroom to tell me that my cousin Guy in France, in northern France, who's a farmer, had fallen off the haystack, he's high up, and he fell backwards and he snapped his back. And he was going to be permanently paralyzed. And through my ignorance, I was in the optimist that I am still, but I was back then. I said, "Well, does he have his hands?" And my mom said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad of a situation. He'll be fine." And then, sure enough, 5 years later, I'm in a car accident that left me permanently paralyzed. And I think probably the biggest challenge for me, was, you know, prior to that, I think things came quite easily. I mean, I knew people, I was able to get jobs, I was accepted. And then all of a sudden now, the same people that would come to visit me at the hospital and say, "Hey, don't worry about it, we got your back. If you need work, come out and reach out to me," or I'll when that day came, it was a bit more challenging. And I think there was no reference point. There wasn't that template, I guess, of other people with a disability work in our industry. So skepticism was certainly there. And I think that was a challenge, like that social acceptance of having someone that's in a wheelchair with a disability to work in a restaurant. And that to me was very hard, very, very hard and very discouraging.
So, Eli, I know that you stated that you were, a chef. You used to work at the back of the house. So now has your role changed? Um, Being a high level quadriplegic, and running the restaurants now. You're more front house now, more, uh,
Yeah.
tell me.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. You know, for me, the change, I had to kind of relearn it, to be honest. Like, I didn't really know how it fit in. But how I realized was, um, what I can still do is plan menus, help cure the food, uh, work with purveyors. I can still help with scheduling. I can still help with the finances, food costs, those type of things. And I can still help with building dishes. So, if a chef and I sit down and we create a dish together on paper, and we start to think about, okay, these are the components, or this is the menu that we're thinking about for spring. These are the different items that we can do. Then I still have that input, and then in the kitchen, as the chef prepares it, be able to taste that food, being able to give feedback, and then also during service, being able to see the food going out, making sure that it's still the level that we're looking to achieve is meeting those expectations. So in a lot of ways, I would say um, I could probably do 75% of what I would have normally done, but I've also learned to do other things as well. Um, but it's just,
You had to evolve.
yeah, it's a physical cutting, dicing, slicing, cooking, on the line. I'm not on the line anymore, expediting, those type of things. So those are the differences.
So now you're more like Bruno and Yannick.
Right. Yeah.
So the next question would be, why did you stay working in the hospitality industry, and what motivated you to keep going?
Well, it's all I know. You know what I mean? Like it's everything to me, and it has been. I still feel that there's, how my story will unfold. Still, is to be determined. But as it's really sort of something that um, I live, breathe, and sleep it. So I didn't really have a choice. I just kept going with it. I was, kind of in a good position because at that point I was an owner, so I was able to, they couldn't fire me, so to speak, for my disability, and also my partner was very, very instrumental in getting me back involved as soon as possible. I was 2 weeks into my injury. I'm still in the hospital, figuring out what color of wall paint to put on the new restaurant. So it kind of never really stopped in a lot of ways.
I mean, I think I'm gonna make the assumption that Bruno and Yannick are very similar passions, and tell me, why did you keep or stay working or start working in the hospitality industry to begin with? Bruno, you said your family, you grew up in it,
Correct.
but why did you decide to open a restaurant here and stay in that industry? Like
So,
you didn't own a restaurant yourself. You just worked with your families.
well, when I grew up, I was a child, so they had restaurants, and I was involved in the day to day. Back in Peru, they had a couple of restaurants. Like I said before, like more like spending time cleaning the tables than
Hmm.
actually helping because I'm just there. Um, why I started the business to begin with was exactly because of those reasons that I mentioned before, which are my I chose to create something that is more accessible. I think hospitality, in essence, is bringing people together. I don't think it's about food or drinks or things of specific products, but rather it's about letting people come in, bringing them together to try something together, whether that's food, a cocktail, or just a band that is in a place. It's about bringing people together, and that's one of the reasons why I think we need everybody to experience something like that, not only able bodies, but anyone.
Yeah.
So
Yannick?
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, my brain, my body was conditioned for constant stimulation and constant movement. So, even though people were well intentioned and they would come to me, post injury saying, maybe you should think about a career in law or a career in finance or something along those lines. I guess what you would call disability friendly careers, right? And I don't mean to degrade them. That's not what I'm saying, but they certainly are, like a desk job, right? Things that aren't as physically demanding. And I just said, oh my God, you mean to tell me I've been working so hard up to this point and I was in this car accident that I could have broken any bone in my body. I just happened to break the vertebrae, which protects the spinal cord. And then, it's just so crazy. And now all of a sudden, now I've got to like rethink this. And so it was just, it just, I just couldn't think about that. It was inconceivable for me to want to do anything else. And I said, there's got to be a way. I mean, for crying out loud, this is the United States. This is New York. I mean, we've got to be able to there's got to be opportunities for all. And certainly it was incredibly difficult. I had people who would tell me, Yannick, you've got to stop this obsession of working in restaurants. The only way you're ever going to work in a restaurant is if you built it to your needs, to your standards. And listen, granted, there are some really old buildings, and it's really hard. I get that. Wheelchairs do take up space in many ways. It's not the easiest thing. Bruno can tell you, Eli can tell you. I mean, we're all pragmatic about this, right? But at the same time, there are also places where I know I could have gotten the job at, and I could have done a great job, and they were definitely spread out. But again, it was just like I guess the lack of education, and also just the prejudice that they would already make up in their mind. Well, how can this guy or person in a wheelchair possibly do the same kind of job as someone that's able-bodied? Yeah. So anyway, the long story short, I stayed with it because I love food, I love wine, and I love people.
On that same train thought, thinking that way, I have a question here. It says, what can we do better to help prepare those with disabilities to find the right job in the hospitality industry? Like, you had Yannick, like, since you touched on some of the challenges,
Sure.
how can things be changed, to make things better and more inclusive?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I think,
overall, how about this? Talk about it overall,
Yes.
front of house, back of the house, employment, everything in the hospitality industry.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely a seat at the table for all types of disabilities, not just people in wheelchairs, but for the deaf, for the blind, for developmental disabilities, all that. I think we need to better educate our hospitality companies about this. Maybe do handbooks, more webinars that are based on this type of subject, showing them that, yeah, maybe I can't pour a Magnum for a party of 10, but in order to sell that Magnum, you need to have somebody that knows that bottle of wine and that, so, if you go, at the end of the day, this is a bottom line industry, right? So, just like we have waiters and captains and people in the back of the house that maybe aren't as good as at certain skill sets, but they provide other skill sets that are incredibly valuable, right? So everything's a balance, right? And that's why you do have captains. That's why you do have waiters. So they help me out, and then I help them out with certain knowledge or other skill sets that they may not have. And I think that's what really needs to be said, because one thing that can never be taken away is one, desire, and two, passion. And if you have those two qualities, I think that everyone deserves a chance.
Bruno, how about you? I know you have a unique aspect. You're in the front of the house, and when I went to your restaurant, I saw you. You was working the crowd and making sure that everybody was well taken care of. So, what changes can you see that the industry can make to make things better for individuals with disabilities? And you take it a step further because you encourage your team to learn sign language to be more inclusive in general.
Correct. And I think that's where it starts. I think a lot of it is being exposed. For example, I don't think okay. So as other folks have different disabilities, whether, as Yannick mentioned, it's not only folks in wheelchairs, but there's other disabilities. I think what will help them get a bit more exposure is when you see other people doing the same thing. Like, for example, we have Eli. If you see him cooking, if we have Eli saying something that I'm thinking about constantly, is like, you have a new cocktail, you have a new entry. I would love to have Eli's picture on that entry that says, this is the guy who did it, right? Because the talent's there. And I feel if we feature the talent a bit more, people will feel a bit more inspired to be like, shoot, I can do this too. I can try this thing out. Why don't I touch base with this guy? Now we have LinkedIn, we have all these type of ways to connect. I feel like if the industry sort of exposes folks who are doing this already, I'm gonna attract other folks who thought it was impossible, but it's not.
And this is going to be unique. I want to hear Eli's perspective as a person that ran restaurants before his injury and now after your injury. What was your perspective on the same thing, accessibility and inclusion before and after your injury?
Yeah, great question. I think what you almost always hear people who are, who weren't say born with a disability, or you kind of lived your life to a certain point with kind of the freeness of being an able-bodied person. And unfortunately, so often you hear, "Well, I didn't think about it until I was hurt," or "I didn't think about it until I got ill," or whatever it was that put you in a position like this. And it really comes down to exposure. It comes down to exposure. Groups like what you're, New York Spinal, and getting the word out there. And I love Bruno what you're doing with the wheelchair days. I think that's awesome. You're embracing it, and I think as far as our industry as a whole, and sort of the issue, and Yannick, you touched on it. It's a very physical industry, and by nature it's fast paced, it's moving, it's running around. It can be very hectic, it can be busy, it can be crowded. So all of these things are exactly what you don't want to put somebody, with maybe a disability or learning. It might on paper it might seem impossible. People might say like, no, like it's a learning disability, intellectual, whatever it is. Uh, that restaurants are going to be like, I don't have time to think about that. I got the next thing to do. I guess my to do list is too high. Services, starting in an hour. But I think what it does, it takes the right individuals, the right ownership to say, you know what, let's be creative. I think that's one thing our industry is creative, and it doesn't take long before you start to find ways to allow for somebody to fit into what you're doing. And not only that, but it can be such a I know lots of examples of restaurants that have focused on training and mentorship, through different disabilities. And not only do they get a great reward from that personally, but the customer base, and the cities, and they really embrace them for that. And I think it's actually a big win for those restaurants, because they're able to people seek them out because they want to support restaurants that are doing the right thing. And restaurants more than ever are shifting towards more of a mission-based thought process when they're opening, because they know that if you can do good when you're doing good, um, it can make a big difference.
Yeah. So, I'm going to go back to some of the other questions. Tell us your favorite aspect of the hospitality industry, Eli.
You're gonna go with me? Um, Yeah, where do I start? I think it's instant gratification. I think in our industry, it's as a chef, I put the work into a dish. I create a dish like it's my own child. I put the effort in, and then I can serve that dish, and you get immediate feedback. Not always good feedback, but you get immediate feedback. Um, and if it doesn't come immediately, you'll see it in the reviews typed up later. But I think in general, I mean, you get a sense of gratification because you're able to allow for people to come in. And you're doing something that's very um, sort of what I think is intimate. Like you're feeding people, right? And you're making them feel good. And you're allowing them to walk into a space and sort of forget what's going on, and transport them, and make them happy and excited. So without a doubt, it's really about pleasing people. And um, I think the other thing is just really that team atmosphere that I was always really um, I gravitated towards.
Bruno, same question. What is your favorite aspect about the?
I think my favorite aspect of it is connecting. I think bringing people together, which means like everybody comes in, they're giving you the chance. There's so many restaurants in New York City, yet they chose to come and have a meal in your place with your team, with your buddies, right? And they're giving you the opportunity for you to connect with them, to tell them a little bit about who you are, who your team is about, what are you bringing. Every restaurant is unique. Re- Starting with the food, with the cocktails, with the whole atmosphere. And they chose to come to know a little bit about you, to know a little bit about your team, about your server, about the chef. Long story short, you're bringing them to be together, be with the loved ones, and share something unique. So, what I loved about the most is bringing people together.
All right, great. Yannick?
I mean, for me, it's taken me to places that I probably would never have gone to. I've met people that I probably would have never have met. I've tasted things that I probably would have never have tasted. But listen, since a little kid, I was very hyper. I love the rush. I love the intensity of it because it certainly is an intense industry. But there's so much diversity that comes from it, and of course, I'm very blessed. I have two incredible parents that love to share, that love to care, and I think it's something that I love to do. I think you certainly have to have this aspect of loving to have the spotlight, whether you're in the back of the house and even though you think you're introverted, but there is something that you're putting yourself out there. So you do like that. There's that showmanship aspect of it that I think that we all enjoy, which is why we all do it. But I think at the end of the day, and to repeat what Eli said, there is that gratification of someone leaving the table satisfied and feeling good. And let's not forget, the word restaurant, it's an old word that comes from you come there to restore yourself, right? It's a place of community gathering. And that's what it's really great about it. And I think that's what makes it really special. And I love to be part of that. And I think that's why Bruno does it. And that's why Eli's still in the game doing it for sure.
I'm going to make Bruno happy because my girlfriend still talks about the purpo dish that you have on your menu. But I'm pretty sure if we go back, that's going to be on our table. Or when we go back. How about this? When we go back.
Alright.
Not even going to say if, when we go back. So what would you guys tell someone that has a disability and wants to make a career in the hospitality industry? Yannick?
Well, first off, I think, like I tell everybody, especially critical mass, you can't judge someone on their disability and go and base that on everybody else. Each person has a different disability. Even though there's four of us here and we're all spinal cord, each of us has a very different way of functioning, quadriplegic, but then there are different levels, paraplegic, different levels, complete, incomplete. I mean, it's really, it's the world of neurology, very complicated. So I think the biggest failure that we can do is to find someone that has a disability who's passionate about the hospitality industry, wants to work in the hospitality industry, but never has, and you just kind of throw them to the wolves. You don't want to do that. That's a very bad thing. So I think, hopefully, obviously the restaurant industry, the hospitality industry has taken a beating during COVID, but hopefully we're not going to go back to the normal. A lot of things have to change. And hopefully one of those things is that we can actually, instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to hire this person with a disability because I want to just hit a quota. I just want to make sure that everybody sees that I'm diverse. That's not what it's about. How do we better prepare individuals in our community who want to go into the hospitality industry to have the skill sets to succeed? And I think that's the most important thing. So, I would tell anyone that has a disability, it's something I did. Listen, I was 25 years old after I left the hospital. I went back to work and all that. And then unfortunately, the restaurant that I was at the Ritz-Carlton closed. But then after that, I struggled to find a job. So I knew that I had to go backwards in order to go forward. And what I did was I actually worked or did what in France and Europe, they do this. They have a program called like being a stagiaire, meaning you do an intern. I did that for a couple of months, and it was really great. And I was able to network because of that. I learned another skill set, and this was all at a retail store because I had never worked in retail. So I learned all of that. So what I would say is that right now people are struggling with money, but people are looking to hire or just volunteer work. So go up to businesses. Hey, can I come hang out with you? Can I learn for a couple of hours a week? Would you mind mentoring me? And you'd be amazed to see the generosity of people. And then they'll use you. They'll use you for certain things because they can use some help. So I would say before you throw yourself to the wolves, develop certain skill sets. And then I'm telling you, you'll build that resume and you will find that proper position that makes sense for you.
Bruno?
I would say something similar to Yannick said, which is, oh, myself included, even though my parents have been doing hospitality for a really long time, doesn't mean they really know how hospitality works, right? We open a restaurant, we open a business, and everybody thinks that a restaurant's easy to do, and we all know that it's not. And there's a lot of things to learn. When I came into this industry, I did not know what back of the house and front of the house was. I just had an idea. The idea was to create a restaurant that would be welcoming to a lot of people. And I had to learn all of this. So similar to what Yannick's saying, I was somebody who was disabled who needed to learn the industry. And I feel like if you're passionate about it, you could do it too. And you may have to take a step back to see like, let me learn more about this because I think it fits what I want to know. And obviously, if you want to be running around, maybe that's not what you should be putting your energy to, but rather something else that you can add a lot of value as well.
Eli.
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure we're honest, and the industry, like I said earlier, it's a tough physical industry.
Yeah.
Are there areas of the job that you can still be involved in that aren't running the kitchen or running up and down stairs really fast, or you think of like old cities like New York and Philadelphia where the infrastructure is tight, it's small, real estate's expensive, there's no room between tables and chairs, and often there's stairs to even get in the places. So I think it's also geographically where you are. It might also be different. It might be different in Tallahassee, Florida, than in Lower East Side of New York. So and I also believe that it's important to be realistic. What are you able to do? Because I think you don't want to try something too fast, too quick, and then to get discouraged. I think Yannick said it really well. Take some small bites. Ask. If you really want to get into restaurants somehow, and you're passionate about whether it's hospitality or service or wine or food, or maybe you just want to learn the back of the house. You want to work with somebody. I say back of the house, I mean the business side of it. Learning some business, some good skills in running a restaurant and how it works. Reach out to some restaurants. I mean, we all have access to everybody now on social media, and whether it's through email or just messaging somebody through Instagram or Facebook, and be honest, like, hey, listen, I was born this way. I was injured. This is what happened. Whatever. I'm interested. I have a passion for it. How can I help you? And Yannick said it best. We call it staging. You go somewhere and you spend some time, and it's it's like an internship almost. They're probably not going to pay you, but you're going to learn some real sort of hard skills that you can then monetize further at another spot or another location, or eventually they'll hire you on because you're that valuable to them.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like in any place you have to prove yourself, but even more so with a disability, but definitely intern and
I
find out.
always tell people I would hire somebody 100 times out of 100 that have a good attitude
Yes.
and are hardworking than somebody who has the resume or the skills on paper but has a shitty attitude. Because the reality of it is that a good attitude can take you a very, very long way.
So, maybe final question from me, and then I think we have one or two questions, maybe one question, and final thoughts. So, what are the most important characteristics needed to survive in this very difficult industry? Yannick.
Can you repeat that one more time, Jose? Sorry.
what are the most important characteristics needed
Yeah,
to survive in this very difficult industry?
yeah, for sure. Well, first off, you have to be passionate about it. You have to love this whole world. You have to like people. If you don't like people, you're going to be in big trouble, whether it's working as a concierge or front desk at a hotel, even working as a manager, in room dining, or even in the back of the house. You're going to always be around people. If you're even a chef or a cook and you think, well, I love food, but I just don't want to deal with people. In this day of age, and Eli can tell you this already, you're constantly dealing with people. So you have to like people. So if you're passionate about people, you love and passionate about food and wine, you're already on step one. But step two will be desire. And I think this is really important, because there will be many, many times that you fail. There'll be many, many times where you will be humbled, and you have to have the desire to want to overcome those failures, because they will constantly happen. Eli alluded to that earlier today. Many dishes I'm sure he created that he thought was fantastic, and then he gave it to somebody and got a little critique, obviously. But you improve upon that, and if you have the desire and the will to survive those bad moments, you're always going to do great. And certainly, what I will say is that there is no doubt, if you have a disability, you are going to face a lot of disappointments, even failures. But take those in stride, learn from them, and build upon them. I consider myself an incrementalist. So I'm certainly not an overnight success. It takes me time. I build up sort of like a statue, little shoulder here, another shoulder there, and that's how I feel. And I think if you go by that, you're gonna be on the right path.
Bruno, what are the most important characteristics needed to survive in this very difficult industry? Especially now, with COVID happening, it's hard. I've seen many restaurants go down. So,
Just like anything, I think the same characteristics, not only this industry, but in life. I think it's just grit, being able to push through it. You have a passion. Don't forget why you started to do this in the first place, and keep going. It's. I mean, it's easier to say, and we, obviously all of us are struggling through this really really tough times. However, pushing through, making sure that this is only gonna make us stronger. I mean, it sounds a bit cliche, but I do feel that way.
and Eli,
Um, tell me the question again.
is what is the most important characteristics needed to survive in this very difficult industry?
Oh, yeah. You gotta have grit. You gotta be able to withstand, take your punches, and keep moving forward. Uh, it's sensationalized a lot on television, so a lot of people thinking they want to get into it because of what they see on TV. Restaurants 15 years ago, 20 years ago were not on TV like they are now. They weren't considered part of show business, and I think it's important for people to understand that it's hard work, determination, and grit. I tell people those are the three things that you need to succeed in this industry, and a positive attitude.
All right, we have one question from someone that says, "Do you experience challenges slash biases when dealing with suppliers?" That is a great question.
I mean, I'll take that
Yeah.
on first, but I've never personally. I mean, when you say suppliers, I guess dealing with like food and wine suppliers or beverage suppliers, is that what maybe? But I'll assume that's the case. Um, I personally have not felt that aspect of it. I've never reached out to a supplier and said I needed something, and they were like, well, sorry, or didn't take me seriously. I have not experienced that. What I have experienced was going for a job interview and not being taken seriously, and sort of things that were said in between the lines that were, I guess they didn't think was offensive, but was very offensive, questioning my skill set and how I could do certain things, or even, being interviewed and then being told that, yeah, you're great, and then never hearing back from them, right? And then you find out who they hired, and very clearly they're completely underqualified and you're way more qualified. So that part I have seen for sure, and I've experienced, is what I should say.
Eli,
I mean, I like like I haven't experienced it firsthand. I think sometimes now people are surprised, like, you're a chef, you know what I mean? Like, just more of the like, the- they're like, they tilt their head sideways like a dog, almost like, huh? And yeah, I think it just catches people off guard. But I don't, as far as like, like systemic sort of bias or anything
Mhm.
within the industry itself. I mean, the restaurant industry is made of a lot of broken toys, as we call it. Um, and it's kind
That's
of
a good
got
one.
all these people that come from wacky backgrounds, and whether it's service staff, the front of the house, like everybody has an issue, everybody has a problem. We all sort of, very few people like said very young, like, oh, I want to grow up and be a line cook, and work, in a hot kitchen with a grumpy chef, and and do 500 covers a night, like, so I think it's yeah, it's just one of those things where I've never experienced it, but I'm sure it exists. But in general, people are pretty inclusive and accepting.
Bruno.
For me, no, I have not experienced it. I'd also come from a different position where I'm usually not interviewing, so I haven't faced this before.
So I want to revisit a question so that everyone, on the attendees can actually, you know, hear. How can the people attending support the work that you guys are doing?
Hmm.
Yannick.
Okay, so in order to support, I mean, listen, first off, if you want to keep track with any of us, social media is always a great way. Like Bruno says, he's got all different kind of events. Like when he does wheelchair day, that's always a great day to go down and support and educate yourself. And then also just going on our website and hopefully, my restaurant will be open shortly. Come on down. And if you can't make it down because you're still concerned about COVID, you can do takeout, delivery, all that kind of stuff. I know that you can do it at High Street, right? High Street on Hudson, which is Eli's place down in the West Village, which is a fabulous restaurant. Bruno does the same thing too. So that's a way to support and follow us and keep track of the work that we're doing, because the beauty of restaurants that they're constantly evolving. There's always this movement happening. So that's a great way.
Bruno.
I agree. I think similar. It's more about you can come visit us, tell us your honest opinion, because that, believe it or not, is what helps us the most. You come in, for example, I like your restaurant. However, I don't see a sign for this, or I'm colorblind. It's hard for me to know where the exit sign is. And little things like that, because our mission is to make it more accessible, and there are things that we may not be accounting for. Then all of us, can help each other. And all the things supporting folks like Eli, Yannick, and try his food. Tell me what you think about it. Like that. That I feel is the best thing we can get.
Eli, anything to add?
Yeah, supporting. I think it's helping to champion some of the different, whether it's restaurants or groups that we're involved with. Yeah, spread the word, and just kind of keep in touch.
We don't have any more questions. You guys have any final thoughts, any plugs that you want to, throw out there? We're gonna put this on our YouTube channel, and it'll be viewed by other people. So if you have, well, we actually have one question that just came up. Bruno, what was your experience like designing your accessible restaurant or instructing staff in sign language? Any challenges or things that went well?
Yes, so this is an interesting question. So we did not end up doing the sign language because I didn't get an instructor on time right before COVID happened. So I just want to make sure I want to be honest about what that happened, but we're still planning to do it. So for the design phase, it was a little bit challenging. Opening a restaurant, you think you're gonna spend $10 and you end up spending $40, and adding this extra twists and flavors to make sure that it's accessible, it does come with a cost. But obviously, you can come out with ingenious ways to make this happen, and I think it is still possible without investing twice as much as you expected to make it accessible. When it comes to the sign language idea, when I would say 90% of the staff was super excited about it and happy about it because they knew me, they understand the whole concept behind it. There are a couple of new folks who did not like the idea because it represented more work for them. Something they need to learn. It's like, well, I just want to work and get a paycheck and be able to pay my bills. I don't know if I want to go back to school and learn this new thing that you're proposing, right? That wasn't out completely explicit, but I sensed a little bit of that. However, I feel like the energy of the team and the morale of the team, 90% of them were really positive and pro the idea, and little by little, that just like if most of the staff is super happy about something, it sort of elevates the energy of the group anyway. So
That's great. So now back to what I was saying before. Any plugs and any closing remarks?
Jose, I just wanted to say, the restaurant that we've designed, we built from the ground up at Contento, was definitely, we kept that in mind with design. And even though we're in a building that's well over 90 years old, we've done everything that we could to make it really inclusive, not to just people in wheelchairs, but of all people. We will have adaptive flatware available for those with limited function. We're going to have a QR code on the menu, so those that are blind, they're visually impaired. The bathroom is completely accessible. We could have had it downstairs, but we built it upstairs. We sacrificed a couple of tables, but again, inclusivity really, is the most important component. And of course, if I'm going to work in this industry and I'm going to preach this, I got to practice it at the same time. But I also do want to say, everybody that joined us today, I mean, the fact that you're here listening to us only empowers our industry and only makes it better. And that's what we need, right? And more people that educate themselves and that can speak better on this subject is only going to make the industry that much better for all.
Mm-hmm. Any other closing remarks? Any plugs?
Well, I'll put a plug in, I guess. I do a podcast called the Chef Radio Podcast. You can look it up, Apple, iTunes, all that, Spotify. Want to hear a little about what's going on in my life and food world and everything. So check that out.
for me, we do as part of Elemental Hospitality Group. I work with a group of wonderful teammates, and each one of us have a goal of giving back to society. Each one of us from different countries who always giving back to. We do small events in other places. We do one. We just did one a couple in Peru. We did one in Colombia, in Cartagena. We plan to do another one in Brazil, and then another one in Mexico. This is just a way of giving back as part of Elemental Hospitality. So if you're interested in learning how we're doing this, just follow us on elementum.hospitality on Instagram, and we're always posting about new ideas and new things that we're doing.
And I'm gonna give Eli one plug, since it's actually restaurant week and you wanted to get a reservation to High Street on the Hudson, and I'm from New York. They have a great prefix menu, and that pan-seared sea bass looks great. And you can stop by and pick up a nice main course for $21. So $21.50, I think it is. Oh, 2021 is 2021. So High Street on the Hudson.
Yeah.
Check them out.
Thanks,
I want
man.
to.
With that.
Yep, I want to thank you guys for joining and giving the chapter opportunity to present. So thank you, Eli. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you, Yannick, for putting this together. And gathering the guys.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you for being such a good moderator.
Thanks, bud.
All right, take care.
See you
Thank
guys.
you, everyone who joined.
Everybody.
Yannick, Bruno, be in touch. Thanks.
Take care. Take care, guys.
Bye bye.